the one thing over which you have absolute control. You have absolute control over only one thing, and that is your thoughts. This is the most significant and inspiring of all facts known to humans. It reflects our divine nature. This ability to control your thoughts is the sole means by which you may control your own destiny. If you fail to control your own mind, you may be sure you will control nothing else. Your mind is your spiritual estate. Protect and use it with the care to which divine royalty is entitled. You were given your willpower for this purpose. Unfortunately, there is no legal protection against those who, by design or through ignorance, poison the minds of others with negative suggestion. Those with negative minds tried to convince Thomas A. Edison that he could not build a machine that would record and reproduce the human voice, because, they said, no one else has ever produced such a machine. Edison did not believe them. He knew that the mind could produce anything the mind could conceive and believe. That knowledge was the thing that lifted the great Edison above the common herd. Men with negative minds told F.W. Woolworth he would go broke trying to run a store on 5 and 10-cent sales. He did not believe them. He knew that he could do anything within reason if he backed his plans with faith. Exercising his right to keep the negative suggestions of others out of his mind, he piled up a fortune of more than $100 million. Doubting Thomas's scoffed scornfully when Henry Ford tried out his first crudely built automobile on the streets of Detroit. Some said the thing would never become practical. Others said no one would pay money for such a contraption. Ford said, "I'll belt the earth with dependable motor cars." And he did. Ford had a mind, and he controlled it. The others have minds that they do not try to control. Mind control is the result of self-discipline and habit. You either control your mind or it controls you. There is no halfway compromise. The most practical method for controlling your mind is the habit of keeping it busy with a definite purpose backed by a definite plan. Study the records of those who achieve noteworthy success, and you will see that they have control over their own minds, and that they exercise that control and direct it toward the attainment of definite objectives. Without this control, success is not possible. People who do not succeed have one distinguishing trait in common. They know all the reasons for failure and have what they believe to be airtight alibis to explain away their own lack of achievement. Some of these alibis are clever, and a few of them are justifiable by the facts. The world wants to know only one thing: have you achieved success? Examine yourself carefully and determine how many of these alibis you use. If I didn't have a wife and family. If I had enough pull. If I had money. If I had a good education. If I could get a job. If I had good health. If I only had time. If times were better. If other people understood me. If conditions around me were only different. If I could live my life over again. If I did not fear what they would say. If I had been given a chance. If I now had a chance. If other people didn't have it in for me. If nothing happens to stop me. If only I were younger. If I only could do what I want. If I had been born rich. If I could meet the right people. If I had the talent that some people have. If I dared to assert myself. If only I had embraced past opportunities. If people didn't get on my nerves. If I didn't have to keep house and look after the children. If I could save some money. If the boss only appreciated me. If I only had somebody to help me. If my family understood me. If I lived in a big city. If I could just get started. If I were only free, if I had the personality of some people, if I were not so fat, if my real talents were known, if I could just get a break, if I could only get out of debt, if I hadn't failed, if I only knew how, if everybody wasn't against me, if I didn't have so many worries, if I could marry the right person, if people weren't so dumb, if my family were not so extravagant, if I were sure of myself, if luck were not against me, if I had not been born under the wrong star, if it were not true that what is to be will be, if I did not have to work so hard, if I hadn't lost my money, if I lived in a different neighborhood, if I didn't have a past, if I only had a business of my own, if other people would only listen to me, if, and this is the greatest of them all, if I had the courage to see myself as I really am, I would find out what is wrong with me and correct it. And I know that something must be wrong with the way I have done things, or I would already have the success that I desire. I recognize that something must be wrong with me, otherwise I would have spent more time analyzing my weaknesses and less time building alibis to cover them. Building alibis to explain away failure is a national pastime. The habit is as old as the human race and is fatal to success. Why do people cling to their pet alibis? The answer is obvious. They defend their alibis because they create them. Your alibi is the child of your own imagination. It is human nature to defend your own brainchild. Building alibis is a deeply rooted habit. Habits are difficult to break, especially when they provide justification for something we do. Plato had this truth in mind when he said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self. To be conquered by self is, of all things, the most shameful and vile." Another philosopher had the same thought in mind when he said, "It was a great surprise to me when I discovered that most of the ugliness I saw in others was but a reflection of my own nature." Elbert Hubbard, philosopher, author, publisher of the Fra magazine, and founder of the Roycrofters community of artists, said, "It has always been a mystery to me why people spend so much time deliberately fooling themselves by creating alibis to cover their weaknesses. If used differently, this same time would be sufficient to cure the weakness. Then no alibis would be needed." In parting, I would remind you that life is a checkerboard, and the player opposite you is time. If you hesitate before moving, or neglect to move promptly, your men will be wiped off the board by time. You are playing against a partner who will not tolerate indecision. Previously, you may have had a logical excuse for not having forced life to come through with whatever you asked. That alibi is now obsolete, because you are in possession of the master key that unlocks the door to life's riches. The master key is intangible, but it is powerful. It is the privilege of creating, in your own mind, a burning desire for a definite form of riches. There is no penalty for the use of this key, but there is a price you must pay if you do not use it. The price is failure. There is a reward of stupendous proportions if you put the key to use. It is the satisfaction that will come to you when you conquer self and force life to pay whatever is asked. The reward is worthy of your effort. Will you make the start and be convinced? Remember that your real wealth can be measured not by what you have, but by what you are.